Okay, everyone, welcome to our show. Let's kick off. Hopefully, the other author will join in the meanwhile when we start. Welcome to our online event, the second batch for our Call for Papers 2022, Challenges and Opportunities, the Future of DeFi in Traditional Finance. Tonight is the second batch from all of our authors, and we're excited to have you here for the information and discussion session. Now there was the bell ring. It looks like the last author has joined. Let me double check real quick. Torgin has joined. Welcome. Exactly as expected. I like this. So the working group education for this call for papers came together, especially Aurelio, Luis, and me, to initiate this research call. Very quick research round or introduction round. My name is Tilma, working in the crypto industry for several years, have been with the major crypto projects out there, such as Cardano, Seba Bank, or Bank Frick. Maybe Luis, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, yeah, I'm Luis. I did my bachelor in Liechtenstein, and there got into like the crypto and blockchain scene and working there for Actus AG. It's one of the leading tax consultancies in the digital asset area. And yeah, that's my background. And besides that, I'm organizing also like one of the leading fintech and crypto conferences called FintechLi, also in Liechtenstein.
We have our third team member, Aurelio. He is currently still busy, but he will join our webinar shortly. Quick introduction for Aurelio is Swiss-based, studied as well at the HSLU International Blockchain Lab, and worked previously at a private bank in Lucerne, Switzerland, and most recently joined a startup VC and is a part of our CVA working group. A quick outlook how we rolled out this call for paper. Pretty much over the whole year, we are busy, and so every month there was a new milestone. We kicked off the project in the beginning of the year. We accepted the abstracts in June and closed the final paper round in August. In September, we announced the selected authors, and some of them already had the chance to present offline in the IED Immersion Education Summit in Lucerne. Tonight, in November, we, with this webinar, finalize the call for papers and currently compile the research journal in where we will publish the paper for all the members of the association, and of course, will distribute it to you as well. We received several papers from different authors, international backgrounds, highly professional, but we couldn't accept them all. You are here today because you have been scored with amongst the best. So we want to give you the chance to present your great work. We used as a marketing strategy, classic social media, entirely virtual, because all the authors, they are decentralized and not all in one city. We have different updates with the videos where we keep the authors and the audience informed and announced in that way the different milestones for the papers. But now, to Luis, would you like to take over and start the introduction round?
Yes, sure. All right. So tonight we have like 6 speakers, and they will present like 5 different papers. So to keep it quick, I would say like that every speaker just introduce yourself, like you have 30 seconds, just like say who you are, what is your background, and then we're moving forward. All right, Salome, it's your turn. You can present yourself.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Salome. I'm the co-founder of 100x, a Web3 development agency company registered in Switzerland. And we help DAOs and companies build legally compliant products and services. Previously, I worked in audit and central banking for several years, until in 2020, when I left my job in the Bank for International Settlements to become advisor, protocol contributor, and researcher to several DAOs.
Great, thank you. All right, then we move directly forward to Susanna. It's your turn.
Yeah, sure. So nice to be here. I work from the World Food Program as part of the Innovation Accelerator. So we deploy innovations on WFP We have deployed more than 100 innovations already, and some of them with blockchain. Before that, I was working in banks. So my background, like it's IT, really, the main area, and of course, bank. I also have worked to ITU, this International Telecommunication Union from UN as well. I did the master on Nicosia, and I'm doing the PhD at University of Geneva. Thanks.
Great, a lot of experience, thank you. Then we move forward to Marcus and Dominic, who would send in like together one paper. So it's your turn.
Yes, thanks a lot, Luis. I can kick it off. My name is Marcus. I've moved into crypto industry back into 2017, joining from Accenture and founding the first startup, layering the foundation for the blockchain equity, what we call now the Registerwertrechte, the legal certainty, when we started tokenizing shares here in Switzerland. 2020, I moved to Signum, built up the whole tokenization business unit for the crypto bank. And I'm now with Kaleido Private Bank, building up the digital asset offering and product for this small private bank in this innovative part. And with that, over to you, Dominic.
Thank you very much, Marcus. My name is Dominic. I'm with the Business Engineering Institute in St. Gallen, a boutique consultancy agency who mainly focus on financial institutions within the DACH LE space. And my topics are advising on digital assets, mainly how to set up a target operating model for financial institutions. My background is from banking. I started with an apprenticeship in banking, moved after my studies to UBS, and also was 3.5 years at Bank Frick in Liechtenstein, where I've integrated 2 startups in the Bank Frick environment, but also further developed the blockchain banking services.
Great, thank you. All right, then to Shadi, it's your turn.
Yes, hello, happy to be here with you. My name is Shadi and I work with Sunzulab. So I'm currently from the office. Sunzulab is a fintech based in Paris, providing mainly quantitative data solutions to crypto professionals. So we work mainly with, that would be hedge funds, crypto exchanges, market makers, or really any other type of crypto professionals. I joined Sunzu from investment banking, so I did the switch this year. And before that, academically speaking, I have a background both in engineering and finance. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Then last but not least, Torgen. And yeah, perfect. Torgen, are you there?
I can see him, yeah, but he is on mute.
Otherwise, we just say like he will introduce himself like when he presenting his paper.
Hey.
Ah, there you are. Perfect.
Am I here?
Yes.
Hey. Sorry, I had some trouble. Yeah, my name's Torgen. I work as a blockchain security engineer at Chain Security, which is a company that does smart contract audits. So we basically try to keep smart contract code safe, bug-free as far as possible. And yeah, this paper on TWAP Oracle attacks, I wrote back when I was studying at UTH for my bachelor's thesis, and then afterwards I turned it into a paper.
Great, thank you. All right, so now the introduction is done and we move forward to the first presentation of Salome. It's all about like CBDCs and private stable coins. And just for all as information, like it would be good if everybody stays like in the time frame of 5 minutes of the presentation, that it's not too long, and we try to also cover like the Q&A in the 5 minutes, but it's also like fine when it's in the end 7 minutes or something like that, but just like that you have a timing for your presentation. All right, so Salome, it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you very much for handing over, and also thank you for giving me the opportunity to present today an overview of my research paper about CBDCs and private stablecoins. We can go to the first slide. Back in 2020, I chose this research topic because of its importance. I think stablecoins play a huge role in the crypto ecosystem, and that can be seen also by its exponential growth in the last years. From around $75 billion in 2021, the stablecoin sector has grown to almost double, to a market cap of around $150 billion by June 2022. While the rest of the crypto struggled with a bear market, but the high demand for stablecoins and the scandals also associated with them, with some of them also have made them a very hot topic. And I think they also attracted more focus from regulatory and policymakers recently. We can go to the next slide. So in my paper, I identified 3 categories of stablecoins. I detailed fiat and collateralized and also algorithmic stablecoins. Then I also presented their risks and benefits. And in the end, I try to compare them in the paper. Today, for time reasons, I would just like to make a brief overview. So fiat-backed, just as the name suggests, these stablecoins are pegged to an existing currency unit by maintaining a reserve of a fiat currency or other forms of collateral. Then we have collateralized stablecoins. They are created by leveraging reserves of other crypto assets. This model doesn't require a centralized system as it operates on blockchains directly. And then we have algorithmic stablecoins. They basically try to do what central banks do, just in a decentralized and fully automated way. Every algorithmic coin has its own complex mechanisms, so there's not a standard operational model. Probably some of you or most of you have heard about algorithmic stablecoins because of the Terra crash. And what I want to add here is that the failure of Terra does not represent the failure of all algorithmic stablecoins for the exact reason I mentioned before, because all algorithmic stablecoins have different specific mechanisms. In general, in the paper, it was easier to compare and draw conclusions about stablecoins, as they have been accessible to everyone for a long time, at least timing in crypto. And some projects have been proven themselves to be successful over several years also, while we had failures, of course, which probably was good lessons, but also expensive lessons for the ecosystem. And as of today, I think stablecoins, they already provide users with a lot of technology benefits, like little volatility, transparency, real-time transfer, and also a store of value. However, as a final remark, it must be noted that also all stablecoin projects are only as healthy as the underlying general crypto market, and also as the traditional financial system, of course. With so many projects also available and so many different types of stablecoins, it became clear that survival depends not only on technical design, but even more also on liquidity. And also, I mean, open blockchain offers really cutthroat competition, because without any regulation or governing bodies, all projects are really subjected to the most brutal playing field, where only the stablecoins that provide the most value to the community will have their backing. We can go to the next slide. Also, with so much demand and news surrounding stablecoins, it's not a surprise that traditional finance become very interested in that topic too. So in the last 2 years, a lot of research about the implementation of CBDCs has taken place, and all the way every central bank basically has been researching the topic. There is still a lot open for discussion internally and also with the public. For that reason, in my paper, I focus on the 3 most discussed CBDCs. And these are wholesale CBDCs, which are more specifically suited or to be used by financial institutions and used to mark the interbank payment system for more efficiency and operating without market opening hours, and also give freedom for these institutional players to create rules that might allow more service or retail, provide more services for retail users as well. Another approach is to issue retail CBDCs. China has done it already, that include P2B payments and is widely accessible to the general public. And there are a lot of different design possibilities for retail CBDCs. And finally, also, I mean, I've been researching hybrid models, which is basically a mixture of the characteristic of retail and wholesale CBDCs. With the exception of the Chinese CBDCs, all other CBDCs are not yet accessible to the general population, and only a few pilot projects have been taken place. For this reason, it was more difficult to compare them and draw clear conclusions. However, it can be expected that a lot more CBDC implementations will come to light in 2023 for sure. We can go to the next slide. The paper also contains a comparative analysis between CBDCs and stablecoins directly, and explores if an overlap between the both exists. This is done by the help of a pestle research methodology, and I examined the impact of some key factors such as political, economical, social, technological, legal, and environmental. And in order to obtain my conclusions and to evaluate the use of both CBDCs and stablecoins on the global market, I investigated some potential influencing factors by means of individual in-depth surveys and also one-on-one interviews with specialists in the industry, such as Pt.2, who was a former Secretary General of the BIS for many years and also has been involved in the retail CBD project, the Cent Dollar in the Bahamas. I also interviewed several representatives of the crypto industry involved in both stablecoins and CBD protocols. Yeah, I think this was quite a lot of information in a short time, so I hope you got some insights from my research paper, and yeah, if you're interested, of course, you can read it.
Great, thank you. It was really interesting, like the short overview. From my side, I have one question, like, what do you think are like stable coins or CBDCs more important, like in the next 2 years, regarding like the mass adoption of crypto, so that we really can, or like have the connection between especially DeFi protocols to everybody in the world? What do you think is there more important, the CBDC or like a stable coin, which is like initiated by a exchange or somebody else? Yeah.
To me, it seems very unlikely that like one stablecoin or CBDC will dominate over another's, basically. It also seems unlikely that the CBDC stablecoin will replace each other. I think they have very different use cases. And I think people have different opinions, they have different needs and goals, and also risk profiles. So I assume there will be room for both all the time. I think CBDCs are definitely legally certain, and they offer institutional support, while stablecoins probably offer more flexibility or opportunities. But I think they're fundamentally different, because stablecoins are a liability on the issuer, whereas CBDCs are liability on the balance sheet of a central bank. So I see room for both in the future. But I think next year, definitely we're going to see a lot of new CBDCs popping up, but that's just me guessing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, yeah, we'll see like what happens. Does somebody else has any questions for Salome? Otherwise, we would go forward to the next presentation. All right. Yeah, then we are to Susanne. She's like discussing the question about KYC and AML verification regarding to DeFi services. I think this is really also like connected to stable coins and CBDCs, because yeah, somehow we have to build a bridge. So yeah, Susanne, it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you for having me and for introducing me. The idea is to discuss how to enable know your customer and anti-money laundering verification in DeFi in similar way that we have with traditional banks. So next slide, please. So I presented myself. I have a technical background and also my supervisor, but we also deep dive on regulation in order to start this research. So like the main body to look at is Financial Action Task Force, intergovernmental organization, and they issue like recommendations to countries in order to comply with AML and other, in order to avoid AML and in order, I mean, AML, anti-money laundering, right? In order to make this happen, and other financial crimes as well. So they have three main guidelines that I think is important to highlight. The first one, that all the work is risk-based. So the higher the risk, the higher the action that you need to take to prevent that risk to happen. The second guideline that I want to highlight is they give some instructions, some recommendations, again, how to do KYC, customer due diligence, enhanced due diligence. All of these terms are related to each other. So, for example, one point that I want to highlight, they say that it's essential to identify the parties of a transaction, but they do not say we need to use government-issued IDs, right? So they put some points in their text, and different countries implement their recommendations in different ways, depending on the risk. That's also depending on the value of the transaction. And the third one is the travel rule, that institutions exchange information between each other. This more recently applied to crypto, that I will refer to it later. But all of these is what we call intermediary-based regulation. So they are supposing that there is someone that will be regulated, that's settling the transaction. But with decentralized finance, we can have transactions that's not passing through intermediaries, right, between two self-hosted wallets. So what can we do? Because this regulation is not enough anymore, right? So next slide, please. So the proposal is, how can we put regulation in a complementary way in the edge, so in the wallet, right? So if we cannot regulate in the middle, can we regulate in the edge? So the idea is that we can have what we're calling a compliant wallet that enable the user to be compliant with regulation. We are not forcing anything. We are only enabling and facilitating the life of a user that wants to be compliant. So why it's important? Because it is already a need for this, because there are many DeFi, what we call institutional DeFi. So perhaps you saw, like last week, the announcement from JP Morgan, very big project on that, but there are other ones trying to focus on this niche. Also travel rule, if you go to the edge of travel rule, you achieve a self-hosted wallet. So you need to make the connection happen. And also, like very famous case like Tornado Cash, all the discussion about privacy and regulation. So can we create a system where we still enable people to transact privately, but without introducing dirt money? So what we're calling like Tornado clean cash. And also it's also important to what we call self-protection, because with like more and more regulation arriving, it becomes sometimes it's a crime to send a transaction on decentralized finance, right? Not only to Tornado Cash, but to sanctioned address and sanctioned countries as well. So this kind of wallet, the idea is that the user has the option to use or not, and it will put something on the transaction that the compliance was done, and entities inside the DLT network, for example, smart contracts, can verify that the analysis was really done and implement what we call like compliant by design. Creating DeFi services that are really institutional DeFi at application level. So entity, we can validate entity. So we can validate like KYC and ML of a person and reuse that in different transactions, or at transaction level as well. And that concludes, like, last slide, please. So what we are proposing is to kind of regulatory environment that's focused on regulated or institutional DeFi. As I said, like implementing compliant by design use case, because the rules can be checked on chain. This model can be implemented in a complementary way of intermediary-based regulations. And we believe that because there is these services and the user can select different service providers. I did not mention that, but the idea is that the user can, the same way that can select different gateways to send the transaction, they can select different analysis services that they think it's better to them. And like this competition among different service providers may create a market to flourish different recognition schemes, innovative ones that, for example, preserve privacy or preserve something that we think that's important in this environment of KYC, like, for example, social-based graphs. And we are really aware that there are many challenges, and we discussed it a bit on the paper, but we believe that we can create an infrastructure that perhaps like first imagine to this DeFi, institutional DeFi, but like with the infrastructure ready and like with these new innovative recognition schemes, we can also spill out effects to other use cases in the blockchain realm. That's it. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you for this overview. I think like this is really a topic like which is really important also like for the future of crypto. So one last question from my side is like, it's maybe more general one, is like, do you think like that this AML and stuff like that should come like from the regulators, or does like the participants in the market have to come up with ideas? So what do you think is there the most important next step?
Yeah, like I think what is happening is that different institutions are trying to create their own KYC and ML nodes to enable institutional DeFi, right? So we have isolated the approach, but if ideally we would want to have a more coordinated approach. So enable, for example, the user to select what's the best provider and creating this market of competition among different providers. So of course, like private sector can help. Institutional standardization bodies can help, or it can help to do that. Otherwise, like if we put that in place, sometimes someone with big market share can also like a very important use case that are also implementing that can pave the way, and other ones may pick back, right? So the answer is that like the DeFi, public sector can help, but it's not like a mandatory thing. But if we want like a general acceptance from the public sector, so if we want like recognition from the public sector, of course, they will be more comfortable if it comes from them, right? So that's my thinking.
All right, thank you for your opinion on this side. Does anybody else has a question for Susanna?
Maybe not a question, but I think in general, KYC and AML, right? Also from the institutional or traditional finance point of view, it always has been an obstacle, right? Compliance takes always time to, until let's say a client is onboarded, it always has been a hassle. But I think we can clearly see that we need this for our industry. And over the last years, pretty much from, the first Bitcoin bull markets until now, I think there's absolutely an improvement on the KYC front.
Sure, thank you for the comment. And I also I'm not saying that I want regulation on the protocol level and all these hard things. It's an optional thing that I believe that some use cases will go in this direction, and some use case I'm not saying that we should apply to everything. Right? Some use case may still be at the same way that we are, and we are not be able to forbid them in a technological way, only in laws. If it's really the case, I'm not advocating nothing of that. I'm just saying that for creating this kind of market, it would be better to everyone to have a coordinated approach, so we can preserve our privacy and preserve what we think that is important, and take advantage of these new recognition schemes in order to really make this happen.
If you allow, I quickly might jump in here as well, also coming a bit from the practical side, dealing with compliance on the banking level, and also talking about the future of DeFi within our private bank. I fully agree what you, Susanna, mentioned before. What's important, in my opinion, to keep in mind is that on-chain compliance and this full dedication to on-chain, it doesn't really solve the problem at the end of the day 100%, because there's still the more qualitative part, which is always a challenge to match these on-chain happenings with the real client history and the practical stuff that happens on this side. And this is currently I guess the hugest challenge that we're facing, to match the storyline of the client with the on-chain metrics and the on-chain analytics that we receive from all these reports. And this is important to keep in mind also for regulatory and compliant solution, that we create solutions that are handleable and also manageable by the users at the end of the day.
Sure. Thank you for your comment. So let's comment on that. Like, is smaller the values, is smaller the regulation, right? Because I mentioned like this risk-based approach. So and also I work with the World Food Programs, right? So like my feeling, and I have all these look at financial inclusion, how DeFi can enable that. So we have like a bit of permission to innovate here, because we are talking about low risk transactions. So it's really, perhaps we can start to innovate in this environment where we can have more permission and then go to this next level.
Maybe before we go in, I just see in the chat, there's actually a question from the audience. Joren Lafer, I will pull up your question, which is, do you think we could separate KYC and AML issues for some protocols or services?
Sorry, I didn't get so separate on different.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So the question is, could you separate KYC and AML issues for some protocols or services?
Well, if I understood the question, I think like the proposal, what they're saying is that when the user will send the transaction, the mechanism can function as entity level or in transaction level. If it works at entity level, it means that, for example, we can generate a soulbound token as kind of NFT, non-transferable NFT that can be reused, and it needs to be in the same network. If it's a transaction level, it can like, because the user really do not want to correlate different transactions, or because they want to interact with different networks, for example, we can have different analysis for different transactions. So it can work in different networks.
Okay, thank you for this. Then Luis, let me take over. Then we move on to the next paper from Dominic and Marcus. The floor is yours. Please feel free and present your paper.
Well, thank you very much, Tilma. Please go to the next slide so we can start directly with our identified DeFi use cases, which we have described in our paper. This three selected DeFi use cases will have huge impact how traditional financial institutions will behave or can behave in the future. But let me start with the first one. You as a natural person are now able in a DeFi environment to act as a liquidity provider for a basket. So for example, you provide a pair of tokens, in this case a green-red token, and you get immediately in atomic swap red token, which reflects your contribution to this DeFi pool. This was beforehand only available for institutional clients or institutions, but not for natural persons. In the middle, you see the case of a decentralized exchange where it can automatically swap one token to another token, fully decentralized, immediate, and around the clock, around the year. On the right side, you see the on-chain credit. You can compare it to a traditional loan for buying a house or something like that. You provide a token as a collateral to this DeFi protocol, and you will receive in exchange your loan, your on-chain credit, in this case, blue token. How would this affect, or how is this going to affect the financial institutions? Please go to the next slide. On the left side, you see the traditional business model of financial institutions, of centralized finance. You see central and trusted institutions act as a trust anchor in this environment. These institutions provide the prices, the products to the clients, which they seem the best fit for the clients, and also are based on traditional revenue models, for example, of fee sharing, of fixed fees for certain services. By putting in DeFi applications in this equation, you have on the right side a decentralized trust called smart contract as a trust anchor for financial products or financial services. The community creates the products. As we have seen before, you as a natural person are now able to participate in more complex financial products, but also new revenue streams are available, for example, for staking, for lending, for borrowing pairs. On the next slide, we have described 3 products which are already out there in the wild. On the left side, the first one is from Signum, a regulated blockchain bank in Switzerland. Signum offers access to not only Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other crypto blue chips, but also to governance token of DeFi protocols. In the middle, you see Bitcoin Swiss, the product from Bitcoin Swiss with liquidity. You as a client of Bitcoin Swiss are able to deposit, for example, Ethereum in a smart contract, and you will receive in exchange a liquidity token, which you can exchange into Swiss francs, euros, USDs. So this is comparable with a Lombard loan from a traditional finance world. And on the right side, you see the third example in the wild. It's called AVARC. It's a so-called whitelisted DeFi pool where you have borrowing lending capabilities. These 3 products are already built on DeFi principles by using DeFi technology. And what are the opportunities and challenges for these products for banks? Markus, please jump in.
Exactly. Thank you, Dominic. And I guess it's then the really important takeaways, as Dominic mentioned. The business model of the bank is going to change with the move towards DeFi. And we tried to cluster the opportunities and also the challenge in like, for us, the most significant parts. So number one is definitely the expansion of the existing range of digital assets, meaning if you're a bank providing access to tokens, you can expand your token universe by increasing the assets under custody that you manage. You can achieve more brokerage fees by expanding the trading in such tokens. Then number 2, and maybe the more relevant and more important ones, are then with the new DeFi products. Let's take the example of a credit or lending topic, the Lombard loan that Dominic mentioned. You can expand your scope of service provision. It's not only a product directly, it's also the service that you provide to the client, because I observe it in my daily business, clients are not, or not all of them, are willing to take the time and invest time to manage their collateral, for example, that they have for their Lombard loan, to increase the collateral if the Bitcoin price is falling, or to decrease it if to manage the capital more efficiently. Last but not least, it's also the participation in these DeFi use cases. We heard about AVARC, we heard about Bitcoin Swiss that collaborates with Liquidity. So you can create completely new products, meaning Lombard loan lending, a credit product which doesn't affect your balance sheet as a bank. And this definitely sums up the major opportunities that come along with the new business model for banks. On the other hand, obviously, there are also challenges, and this is one of the most important one is the availability of know-how and education, because blockchain and DeFi, this needs to be educated and managed cross-functional through the bank. So this starts with the front, but it does also affect risk management. It affects compliance, and it affects also asset management and product management. So at the end of the day, you need to build this know-how internally, because it's also one of the important aspects for regulators, that the know-how is in the bank, because it needs to be understood how the processes work. Additionally, as a second part, blockchain is still a pretty young technology coming along and adhering to many risks. Obviously, for example, the loss of a private key. So we know from traditional securities, if something happens, you can somehow restore them because there's a legal counterparty. So if I lose, for example, Nestle stocks or shares, I can reissue these shares, but for Bitcoin or other coins, it's just not possible. So this affects and also not only the operational infrastructure, but also the risk management. How do you potentially insure it? And last but not least, touches a bit Susanna's point regarding the regulation. So banks are used to collaborate and cooperate with counterparties that are most of the time funds or limited companies. But what we're dealing now is we're dealing with smart contracts and DAOs at the end of the day. And this creates new questions, obviously, that need to be resolved in this space. So what are our key takeaways if we move to the last slide? I guess important for banks is to think decentralized. We have heard the business model is going to change. So the financial system of tomorrow is going to be decentralized. banks are not the product builder, the ultimate product builder anymore. So it's a connection and the connectivity that it's being built by a network to the different providers of such products. Number two, be innovative but act compliant. I guess most important of all, it's to listen to your clients, what your clients need, what your clients want. But at the end of the day, I really love that. I love this sentence. If you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance, and then you're at the edge. Last but not least, focus also on differentiation. There are many things happening in the crypto space, also in the banking crypto space, that are becoming commodity. For example, brokerage services, custody services. So as a bank, focus on where you have an edge, where you have an USP, and focus on building that, and not on focus on building the operations around it, around stuff that is really already now or already today commodity. With that, I would also like to thank you for providing us this opportunity, and also the various feedbacks that we received for our paper. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, you too. I really enjoyed working through your paper, and you also already presented offline, which I think is absolutely a great chance. Maybe one question on my side is, since you selected the example in DeFi use cases, could you tell the audience a little bit what is the biggest of the three, and if you see a trend, if one is more applied than the other?
Would you like to start, or shall I?
Yeah, just jump in.
You can take it.
Thank you very much. If you have, as a starting point, a lot of banks are going to have an MOP of an offering of digital assets. So therefore, the clients can buy and sell digital assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum. What we see in the market is that institutions are going to expand their digital asset offering by adding additional tokens, by adding thematic funds to their offering. This is one of the most important trends that we see, also by adding a DeFi governance tokens to the offering. From my perspective, please, Marcus, add your point of view.
I guess you're absolutely right with the starting point. I guess for the future, also this off-balance sheet lending topics are becoming more and more important, because this is something that really solves a lot of issues. For example, also banks effectively using the balance sheet for such credits, and we also gonna see, and I'm always a bit curious what's coming next, because maybe there are also use cases that we haven't heard of yet, and that's also important, as I mentioned on the second point. Also always listen to your customers, what they want, and maybe you can create also an amazing new DeFi product, which then creates a lot of advantages.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thanks for you too. Great paper. I can encourage the other authors to actually read that paper as well once we distribute our research journal. With this, I would like to move on to the next author. We have Chadi. Thanks for rearranging your schedule that you can be here with us today. And please go ahead and present your topic.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Timur, and absolutely no worries. So actually, I moved my train to tomorrow just to say that I'm going to Token 2049, which is happening in London, and I would be happy to hear from you if you're there too. So now moving to the paper. My paper is called DeFi versus CeFi and TradFi, Price Discovery Comparison and the Rise of DEX and DAOs. As you will see in the next parts, the paper is focused on liquidity or market liquidity. So I would like to start just by defining what that means. For me, or generally, there are two types of liquidity. There is what we may call monetary liquidity and market liquidity. By monetary liquidity, we mean how or to what extent an institution is able to pay or to meet its short-term liabilities. So we're definitely not talking about that today. We're talking about market liquidity, which means, or the general definition is, if you take a financial asset trading on financial markets, how quickly are you able to sell it? How quickly are you able for it to change hands without really impacting its price? And the way we see it at Sunzulab, there are two main pillars on which liquidity is built. So you have price discovery and also the quantity. So the quality and the quantity. And that's what you may have seen in the title of this paper. Now, on the quality side, you take a financial asset. You would like to know how the price was defined and if it is a fair price. And on the quantity side, you also would like to know what are the available quantities of that financial asset traded on financial markets. So this was just like the first part to define the important terms in this paper. Now, what I put here in this first slide are some extracts from the paper. So, for example, at the top left, what we see is a survey which was done by PwC in their latest crypto hedge fund report. The most important information here is that when crypto funds or professional crypto funds were actually asked what is the most important consideration for you when you're trading crypto, as you can see, around 38% of them answered liquidity. So this is just to show to what extent liquidity is important, not only in crypto markets, but in any financial market. Moving from there, we tried to come up with a segmentation of different types of liquidity. So that's what you can see in the image in the form of the iceberg. So we define what we see as invisible liquidity and also visible liquidity. And there is a time correlation or time relation between all these types of liquidity. So starting with visible liquidity, which are maybe more familiar terms. So in there, you have what we would call transaction liquidity, which is realized transactions and what you can see from financial assets or crypto actually being traded. And you also have order book liquidity. That liquidity is related to central order books of centralized exchanges. And it is related to all those orders that are just sitting in the order book waiting to meet a limit and to be executed. In the invisible liquidity part, which is actually pretty huge, I won't go into every kind of invisible liquidity, but for example, you can think of dark pool trading. That is something we put in that category because in dark pool trading, you have volumes that are executed without ever knowing the amounts nor who transferred what to whom. And now in the second part of this slide, you have what I talked about. So you have on the left price discovery, which represents the quality part. And on the right, you have the quantity represented by market depth. Now, I put here a kind of differentiation between TradFi, CFI, and DeFi. To say it really quickly, how prices are so prices of financial assets and also for crypto are mainly defined on a centralized exchange. If we start with TradFi, for example, taking an exchange like Euronext, as you may know, trading is happening Monday to Friday, and then from around 9 a.m. till 5 p.m., depending on the region, depending on how the exchange works. And you also have at the start and at the finish of every day, you have what is called an auction, which is a period where trading stops, volumes and orders are aggregated, and then you have a process where, depending on volumes that came, orders will go at a defined price. And this is actually very good because those auctions at the start and at the end of every day are what enables us to define a closing price for a security and also a starting, we would call it a starting price, which would be at which price it starts trading at the beginning of the day. Now, I spent some time on this because this is very important. This is very qualitative, I would say, and we don't have anything like it in the crypto space from our information or from what we've seen. If you take SEXs, centralized exchanges, they're trading on a continuous matter 24/7. So there is at no point such auction happening. And if you take DeFi, that is really another thing. So I will move into more detail on that in the next slide, but we can already announce that prices in DeFi or indexes are defined in a relative way via the constant function market maker model. So the X times Y equals K formula, which you have, I'm sure you have seen it somewhere. So now if we move to the second slide to see what actually this function means. So in the second part of my report, we focused on DEXs and on Uniswap, because Uniswap is absolutely killing it on this space. I think somewhere around 90% of volumes of DEX volumes are happening on Uniswap. So I don't remember if it was the first one to introduce, the first DEX to introduce this formula of X times Y equals K. Very quickly, what this formula means is that you take liquidity pools. So in a liquidity pool, you have two tokens. X is the amount or quantity available of X, of token one. Y is the amount available of token two. And every time you need to have the multiple of those two quantities constant equal to K. Now, this formula was already working in V2. Now, what the Uniswap V3 brought in 2021 is an enhancement to this formula by bringing concentrated liquidity. What we mean by that is that beforehand, capital was allocated to the whole curve that you can see at the bottom on the left, which was really inefficient, because studies shown that taking any liquidity pool, you had around 95% of deposited volumes, which was not used. Now with V3, you had the option to concentrate your liquidity, to actually allocate it to specific ranges around what would be the mid price in centralized exchanges. And going from there, as proven by Uniswap, that enhanced capital efficiency by over 4,000 times. It also, so V3 also brought some other enhancements. I wouldn't go into too much detail, but on the graph on the bottom at the right, you can show that, for example, in V2, liquidity is so allocated in a linear manner all over the curve, whereas in V2 you can actually select where you would like to put your liquidity when providing it to a liquidity pool. Now, in the interest of time, I would move to the third and last slide. So I end my paper talking about a very important topic, which is the one of interoperability. Again, what this means is in the crypto space is for blockchains to be able to communicate with each other. And for example, for Bitcoin, the token BTC to be able to be exchanged on Ethereum and on Solana and on Polkadot and really anywhere. It is really a complex problem that a lot of people are working on. One of the blockchains that is really tackling this problem is Polkadot. And maybe in the interest of time, I would leave you to read the paper to understand a bit how Polkadot works in a technical manner. But I only brought the interoperability problem here because for me, DeFi won't be able to exist if it doesn't tackle in a way this problem. Even if even Vitalik, so the co-founder of Ethereum, has actually is not really sure if the future of blockchain is cross-chain or multi-chain. What he means by that is that where we have in the future, so multiple blockchains communicating, or multiple blockchains living their life separately, and you would basically have to choose one or two of them where you would do your operations. So I hope I wasn't too long, and I would be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Chadi. Very interesting paper also on your side, I must say. I can see that the work you have been put in there. I myself also played around with Uniswap and of course other trading platforms, and I experienced these problems of liquidity as well, that you sometimes just cannot execute the trade, or you need to wait, and then of course this is depending on the market itself. But then turning to our audience, to the authors, do you have another question for Charlie?
Yeah, I'd actually be interested, like, is there a good way to compare the liquidity on Uniswap to the liquidity on like an order book exchange? Because on Uniswap, it's very obvious to see exactly how much there is, whereas on order books, as you said, there's a lot of dark liquidity.
So yeah, the answer is yes, and I have put on my paper. So there's a document written by Uniswap called the dominance of Uniswap, and if possible, if we could go back to the first slide, please. So yeah, so that pink chart, I extracted it from there. What it actually shows is that Uniswap has been crushing it in terms of market depth volume, so which is a part of liquidity. The way they calculate, because of course Uniswap doesn't have a central order book, but they came again with a formula in the NX part that you can see to define what would be a theoretical market depth on a DEX. And using that, they say that actually Uniswap is providing way more liquidity than the next one, which is Binance or Coinbase or Kraken. So in that paper, they actually managed to compare liquidity, and I'm using the brackets because, as I explained, liquidity can mean a lot of things. So in that paper, they compared the market depth between a DEX, Uniswap, and centralized exchanges. So Susanna asked,
yeah, what's the source of your first graph? Like you show like this most common consideration.
Yeah, that comes from reports by PwC. Again, in my paper, you would find the source, but it's the last one. I think it came in July. It's their crypto hedge fund report. They do one every year.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question on that side from our authors. Nice, healthy discussion. Then we move on to Torgin. You also already had the possibility to present offline, and I'm looking very much forward to your paper. Why? Because we can hear that the other authors, they have a strong financial background and application, and we look at trends. But actually, Torgin comes really from the tech side, and I'm looking forward to listen to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So yeah, my paper is called TWAP Oracle Attacks, Easier Done Than Said. And what it looks at is Uniswap, which Chadi just kind of explained to us very nicely, which is a decentralized exchange. And specifically the Uniswap Oracle. So in a lot of financial applications, such as, for example, lending, it's very important to know what the price of different assets is. So one example would be if you want to accept Ethereum as a collateral, then you need to know what the Ethereum price is so that you can let someone borrow against it, right? And so you need to have some source of the price. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. And this is what we call oracles. And the nice thing about the Uniswap Oracle is that it's completely on-chain, right? Because the Uniswap market is already on-chain anyway. So if you can just read the price from Uniswap, then you don't need any external price sources that are not on-chain, right? The kind of alternative to this would be if you use an off-chain oracle, such as Chainlink is the biggest one. And there you basically take like data from centralized exchanges and feed them onto the chain. But of course, you always have points of trust for everything that is outside of the chain, because it's an untrusted environment and kind of anything can happen. Whereas on chain, you know exactly what happened because you can just read it from the chain. So yeah, so in this paper, I looked at the TWAP oracle of Uniswap and kind of how to manipulate it. And it turned out that it's actually easier to manipulate than it was thought before. And what I would like to mostly talk about today is actually things that I learned after writing the paper and kind of the more updated version of this. So if we can go to the next slide. So as you all know, Ethereum had a very big event last month, which was the Ethereum merge. And there we changed from proof of work to proof of stake on Ethereum. And that had a very important difference, which is how the block production works. So in proof of work, every miner tries to mine every single block on the chain. And what that means is it's actually random who is going to produce the next block, and you can't know ahead of time. Whereas in proof of stake, it's a bit more structured, let's say, where the block producers are actually determined ahead of time. And in the case of Ethereum specifically, we use the Randau value together with the current validator set to choose these next validators. And the consequence of that is that we will know all of the validators that are going to produce blocks for the current epoch and also for the next epoch. And 2 epochs in Ethereum are about 12 minutes. So that means that if you are a validator on Ethereum, you can know up to 12 minutes ahead of time when you are going to be producing a block. And you can like count on that, right? You can use this knowledge. So if we go to the next slide. So this knowledge of being able to produce a future block is what I call future block MEV. And MEV is a whole topic for itself, but basically the idea is that if you produce a block, you can decide the order of the transactions in that block. And so specifically, you can put your own transactions at the very beginning of a block if you're the one that's producing it. And so now with that, we come back to this Uniswap oracle manipulation, because we can use that to make the Uniswap manipulation attack cheaper. So here on the left, we have an example of how you would manipulate the Uniswap oracle. So basically what the Uniswap oracle does is it just reads the price of an asset on Uniswap. But it does this, it takes a weighted average over some time. So let's say like the average price over the last 30 minutes. And it always only records this price at the end of every block. So if we want to manipulate this average, what we can do is we can move the price of on Uniswap in a single block, right? And then it will have some impact on the average as well. So let's say there's some asset that we're trying to manipulate, and it's currently trading at a price of 1. And then we buy a bunch of that asset from the Uniswap pool to make it so that the price is 6. And then we wait until that first block is over. And then we have here this little red circle, which signifies the end of the block. And there the price is recorded. And this is actually what is supposed to make the Uniswap oracle expensive to manipulate. Because what happens in normal market conditions, if you manipulate the price of an asset and then just leave it being wrong, anybody else can see that that price is wrong. And some arbitrager is going to come by and basically take that arbitrage opportunity, right? They could sell the asset here for 6 times as much as it's worth. So obviously they're going to do that and take the risk-free profit. But if now we assume that our attacker is actually the block producer of the next block, of the block n+1 here, then what he can do is he can just manipulate, or like he can take that arbitrage opportunity himself, right? He just sells the tokens that he just bought back, and he guarantees himself to be able to do this because he puts his own transaction at the very beginning of the block that he's producing. And nobody else is going to have a chance to take this arbitrage from him because he literally has the power to decide which transactions are going to come first in a block. And after he already takes this arbitrage himself, then all the transactions that come afterwards don't matter because the price has already been equalized. So in this way, you can kind of like hide this arbitrage or hide the MEV. But still you're going to have the impact on the oracle, right? So you can like pretend that the asset is worth more or less than it actually is. So essentially you can manipulate the price oracle for free because all of the arbitrage loss that you would usually take, and this is actually also like what is typically taken as the cost of manipulating the oracle, is we assume that there is arbitrage. But here we can actually break this no arbitrage condition and take all the other arbitrageurs out of the market. And so now we have one block that's manipulated, right? And depending on how high you can manipulate that one single block, you're going to have a big impact on the average. And so you're kind of no longer limited by the cost of the attack because it's essentially free aside from trading fees. But you're now limited by the amount of liquidity that you have to do this manipulation because you actually need the funds to move the market. And on the Uniswap v2 oracle, it's actually probably feasible to move the average by a large amount in just a single block. In Uniswap v3, they actually changed how the oracle works, and they take a geometric mean instead of a normal arithmetic mean. And that is less, the like single outliers have less of an effect on a geometric mean. So if you wanted to manipulate a Uniswap v3 oracle, you would probably have to repeat this attack multiple times. So can we go to the next slide? So the takeaways from all of this is, first of all, the block proposers in proof of stake are known in advance, and this is different than it was before in proof of work. And second of all, this information is valuable and it has security implications. So it is valuable because, I mean, we just saw one example, right? You can do this manipulation, which is usually very expensive, for free by using your information. But also it has security implications. So if you are someone that uses the oracle of Uniswap in their lending protocol, for example, then you cannot make the assumption that arbitrageurs are going to correct the price on Uniswap, and you have to take this into consideration for your security model. Yeah, final slide. If you want to learn more about this, I actually wrote a blog article that's a bit more condensed than the paper and also has these like updated parts. You can find that on chainsecurity.com. And yeah, aside from that, if you want, you can follow me on Twitter, which is also on the next slide.
Thank you, Torben. I really like also the technical part. And I think we can all agree that manipulation in generally is, you know, a negative word and comes with security. Do you have suggestions, or could you explain how to prevent those attacks and what to do better to not have this manipulation?
Yeah. So I mean, unfortunately, the way that like the mitigation that people use in practice is that they just don't use the Uniswap Oracle. They instead use some off-chain Oracle, which, you know, as long as your off-chain parties are fully trusted and can't be hacked and so on, those work. But the whole point of DeFi is kind of that we don't need these trusted off-chain entities, right? So in practice, people just use centralized solutions because it's easier. But of course, it would be nice if we can use these full on-chain solutions. And I think there are some promising things that you can do. So first of all, just the using Uniswap v3, which is less affected by outliers, makes a big difference. And then also you could actually add some additional outlier detection. So this is kind of difficult to do on-chain because it's expensive computationally, but there are actually some ways that you could use like a optimistic system to detect outliers and report them in kind of a, using an optimistic system where you can have like outlier proofs that can be computed off-chain. And then the other thing is that the amount of money that it takes to move the market is always dependent on how big the liquidity pools are. So the more liquidity there is on Uniswap, the less easy it is to manipulate the Uniswap price, right? So I think for some assets, like if you want an ETH to USD Oracle, it's probably fine to use Uniswap because it's very, very liquid. If you want to use it for some small governance token, that's like the worst idea ever, because it'll be super easy to manipulate. But then again, like it's actually also difficult to have alternatives for that. So I think it's also important to keep in mind the fundamental limitations of oracles. I mean, they can only tell you what the market price is, but for small markets, that can always be manipulated.
That is understood. Let's turn one last time to the audience. Is there one remaining question which you'd like to ask Torgen?
Can I go?
Yes, please, please.
Yeah, I actually had one question. Not sure if it falls entirely into your subject. So I think you saw the Mango hack that happened recently. I know we were talking about TWAP oracles, and I think that happened using the Pith network oracle, which is VWAP, I think, but I didn't get the time to technically read how the hacker managed to inflate price and do his hack. Do you happen to have an answer, a technical answer to how he did that?
Yeah. So I mean, I think that basically falls into that last thing that I talked about, that an oracle can only ever tell you what the market price is, right? And so in this case, on Mango, they were actually allowing their own governance token to be used as collateral. And that was just a very illiquid token, right? So what the exploiter did is they just bought a bunch of that token on the market, and they actually made the price, you know, I don't know, 5 times as high as it was before or something by just buying, right? But the oracle technically reported the market price. It's just that that market price increased very quickly and was not going to stay at that level, right? So, I mean, I think a TWAP actually might have helped there, because at least you're taking an average over more time. So the manipulation would have had to stay for longer, and there would have been more opportunity for arbitrage. I mean, I think you're correct that they used a volume weighted price, which basically means just the spot price weighted by like the volume of the different markets. But that updates immediately, right? So you only need to manipulate for a very short amount of time. But yeah, I think like no Oracle design could have helped that. It was just a bad decision to allow such an illiquid collateral at all. But I mean, I think that's not just a DeFi thing, right? I mean, just today, we saw a lot of drama in crypto about Alameda potentially having loans that are too big against illiquid collateral. So yeah, I think it's definitely a risk management thing. And yeah, you should really just keep liquidity very high on your list of things that are important, especially when it comes to loans.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Susanna, you had a question?
Sure. Yeah. So if you look at distributed systems, it's already an old fact that having a leader on the decision is not a good thing, right? So Algorand and Edera, for example, I think they say like, I'm leaderless, right? So that's one thing that I didn't know actually, that in proof of stake, the new proof of stake of Ethereum, they have this leadership determined beforehand. But on the other hand, they can also depend. I think they depend on how much staking you have, right? Because of course, like when you validate a block, you receive a reward. So there is still some randomness on this process, and there is still the legislation. So I just wanted you to comment, like if you know more about it, like how this decision making of having a leader or leadless protocol was done, and what are the mitigations that are inside the decision making in order to avoid that would also have an impact on how to minimize the risk of this kind of attack. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, it is random, but it's just that the randomness is decided ahead of time, right? So you always like take the current input to generate the randomness of the next epoch. So you know the next epoch already. And what matters for this attack really is just that you know like the next block producer. That's kind of enough. So I'm not super familiar with Algorand and Hedera. I don't know if and why they can be leaderless. I'm sure there are some trade-offs to be considered there. I know that Ethereum is working on something they call secret leader elections, which makes it so that other people cannot know who is going to be producing blocks in the future. But as far as I know, the leaders that are chosen would still know themselves that they're going to be producing a block. And so in that case, it doesn't actually help for this specific use case, but there's actually also a lot of other bad things that can happen if you know ahead of time who the leaders are going to be, especially when it comes to denial of service attacks. So this is something that we've seen on Solana, for example, a couple times, where the specific nodes that were block producers were just attacked with a denial of service and went down due to too much network load. And I think that that is also something that is a risk for Ethereum nodes. There's nothing currently that stops this. So essentially every person that runs a staking node in Ethereum needs to ensure their own DDoS protection, which, you know, is actually also kind of a problem because it's a centralizing factor. It's probably more likely that you have good infrastructure with protection against this stuff if you are a big company that runs a lot of validators, rather than like people running a validator at home. So it's probably small validators that are most susceptible to this. So far, there haven't been any cases of denial of service attacks, as far as I know. But there's actually a paper by Hopper where they looked at this and they basically showed that it's possible and that it's a real risk. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
With that one, I would like to thank all the authors. We took a little bit more time, but on my side, I must say, just like the first batch of the authors, it's just so interesting with all you in one room and having the short bits of knowledge you presented tonight. Then with this, let's close the webinar for tonight. With the next steps, we now compiling the research journal. And once this is done, we will contact you again with the final journal, and which you then can distribute to friends. And of course, read the article, the other articles of the authors. Thank you very much and have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.